Hello again everyone, this is Michinatsu. In this video, I would love to share the process of how I developed what we call the English brain. I was born and raised in Japan, and it wasn't until I turned 20 and went on a working holiday that I lived overseas for an extended period. Now I'm living in Melbourne, working and surviving here. Before that, I didn't study abroad or have any special English education growing up. Even so, I have reached a point where I can live here without any issues. Sometimes it feels like a dream because it was one of my dreams, but I have learned that if I don't give up, I can achieve my goals. And most importantly, I think what I gained was not just an English brain. I've got more than that. But before we start, I just wanted to let you know that everyone's learning journey should be different. So this is simply my personal story of how I grew up and studied. So take it easy. Take this video as a reference. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you have got any questions, comments, please let me know. I would love to hear what you have to say. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you're more than welcome to as well. Alright, let's get right into it. So my first stage will be my school days. I would say it was all about input, like input, like input multiple, I don't know, like 300 times or so. Like most people, I went to public school until high school and studied English like everyone else. The only one difference will be because I enjoyed studying English, so I spent a little extra time on it. Back then, my focus was mainly on traditional like study materials such as good old textbooks, right, from school, or those little cute vocabulary books, anything that I could get my hands on, basically, to improve my English. But I can say that I did heaps of input, like heaps of input. Regarding input, I think it's crucial. I'm aware that I tell you guys like, hey, you guys need to do output, like you need to speak and listen and all that, but input is also important, and I think input has kind of helped me to get here as well. In general, like without input, there's no way to gain new knowledge and information, right? But here's the key. So when it comes to input, remember that you have choices and be responsible for what you use and how you study. And I think this sense of responsibility leads to empowerment, essentially your motivation to study. Remember how we studied back in school? They say like, hey, study this, do that. So we had to memorize a bunch of vocabularies on the page, certain page. So that's how we learned English. I think it was necessary. It was a great experience. It sounds a bit sarcastic, but now I found it quite belittling, because essentially what you are doing is you study English because someone says so, right? Again, when it comes to input, you can choose what to use and how you use them. I'm taking an online course in English to become a counselor. I don't want to be a counselor, but I found it interesting because it's a bunch of psychology and self-development, and I'm enjoying the contents, and I'm enjoying the fact that I'm taking the course in English. I also read in English, and I watch random videos on YouTube, which probably I have to cut back a little bit, but you can see that now I'm taking the control of what I use and how I study English. Yeah, in summary, back then, when I was in school, what I did was input, but mainly it's tied to school and preparing for exams, I have to confess. And the second step that I went through was my working holiday days. I would say that was probably one of the most difficult times. When I first arrived in Australia on my working holiday, I heavily relied on translation. So I would think of something in Japanese and then try to find the right words. I mean, basically equivalent, isn't it, in English. For example, if I wanted to say this in English, I would go like, okay, I have to start with can I? It sounds too casual, so I should say can I please? Okay, can I please? What's 洗濯をする? Washing clothes? No. Do the laundry. So then I can say that can I please do the laundry tomorrow? As you can see, it takes time. So I was terrible at spontaneous, just small chit chat or replying to banters and stuff. It was hard because I felt so miserable. I couldn't laugh at all the jokes that people were making. It was not fun. But what I learned during those days was applying the grammar rules that I had learned in school in Japan. And you might think like, oh, it sounds hard. I mean, it's not efficient. It's time consuming, isn't it? And I completely agree with you. And probably some of you guys are going through this and you can't really get out of this phase. If you ask me a piece of advice, I would say, look, it's probably unavoidable. Like, at least it's hard to avoid. How come, you might ask? Because we have the Japanese brain, and it's not a terrible thing. There's an interesting thing called Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Sorry, I couldn't say it right. But aka linguistic relativity. It suggests that the language a person speaks influences their thought process and perception of the world. So we behave and act based on Japanese, understand whatever is going on around us in Japanese. Considering that, like, it's completely natural. Like, when you want to say something, first Japanese expressions come up. To change that, it's gonna be extremely difficult. And I would say if there is some sort of like a gadget that let you kind of check away your mother tongue brain, in our case, the Japanese brain, I think your body is gonna go crazy because how you think and your body, and I mean probably everything inside you, there should be a discord because you don't know how to act and you don't know how to communicate with people. So what I'm trying to say here is it's okay to have the Japanese brain. In many cases, overlooked. I mean, people say like, oh, I want to have the English brain and all that, and I totally get it. But we should appreciate what we have as well. Like being able to speak Japanese, it's also a skill as well, and it's strongly tied to our identity, even like our personality too. If you're struggling with like translating from Japanese to English, I want to reassure you that it's not your fault. It's not because like you're not smart enough or anything. It's just difficult. I don't want to give you a bunch of lies just to get the attention on YouTube. Look, I want to be honest with you. Like, I wish I could give you a quick fix here, but I think the truth is you do need to go through this phase because we've got the Japanese brain, because we didn't have many like practices or even like opportunities to make sentences using grammar rules. So now if you are going through this phase, just remind yourself that you are practicing. You're just making the most of the opportunities. You're making most of the knowledge that you got in school. You don't need to be sad or anything. I was back then, but when I look back, I think it was necessary, and it was in a way, it was a great experience. Step 3, I was still in Australia, so I started getting more confidence with variations. At this stage, I found myself becoming more flexible with the grammar that I had learned. And here, I had 2 key findings. And the first one is, as I become able to say more, I also become able to hear more. So one of the interesting things about language learning is the interdependence of language skills. One skill improves and other skills also follow. I experienced this myself. I began to make English sentences sentences and also integrate some phrases that I learned before into daily conversations. And I think this naturally led to improvement of my ability to understand what other people were talking about. What you can see now is not a magic or anything, or it's not because I did a certain study method or whatsoever. I think it was natural process of probably anyone can go through, practicing making sentences and getting used to grammar rules, and then just being a bit brave and try to speak to people. Nothing special. As I became more confident with grammar rules, I started to experiment and add a little bit more detail into a short sentence. Let's say I can say that's that's great. I can expand that expression to that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's a great idea. And then I'll get to know that I can apply this to negative expressions such as that's sad, that's bad, that's a, horrible thing to say or something like that. I would call this compound interest effect in language learning. It's like how shares, especially index funds, work in the long term. For example, you can say one thing and then that one thing can become two. And then you can say two and then it expands to 4, and a 4 becomes 8, and an 8 becomes 16. Something like this. It makes sense, doesn't it? Another example will be I can say I study medicine, and then after that I'll be able to say I am studying medicine now. I am going to study medicine. I was studying medicine. I am keen to study medicine. And I know it might sound too good to be true, but this process of gradually making sentence longer gets easier over time. Believe me, it only gets easier. But I just want to remind you that it all starts from those short, simple sentences. You can't underestimate the power of simple expressions, I always tell you guys. So you won't be able to hold long, meaningful conversations if you can't say simple expressions first. Now, I know some of you guys don't want to hear any mindset or mentality kind of talk here. If you want to improve your English, I think that's where courage comes in. At this point, now you're getting used to grammar and some vocabularies. At this point, I think the next challenge is going to be a step out of your comfort zone and try using phrases that you have never used before. I know it makes you feel nervous and you feel insecure inside, but from my experience, in many cases, it works. People understand you. In deep down, you know it's right. Once you use a phrase successfully, it becomes your confidence. Your confidence grows, so you'll be able to say more things and then stuff with more detail. So, as I said before, what you need is just a little bit of courage. Looking back, I think what I used to do was going back to study again, which was basically input. And I thought if I do more input, my English will be better. But what I needed was just squeeze out a bit of courage and say stuff. Just say it. Just try it. So in case if you feel like you're stuck in this similar phase, a piece of advice that I would love to give you guys is courage. Hey, squeeze out your courage. Just a little bit is enough. Finally, what I think can be called breakthrough moments. Sorry for keeping you wait. I truly believe that this is the combination of what I built up and some new tips that I learned around this phase. And one thing that I can tell you will be grammar was not my guidance anymore. It was part of my communication skills. I tell you, it did not come from nowhere, but practice. As I mentioned before, I started feeling the compound interest effect. So if I learn 1, it becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. And on top of that, funny things started happen. I've been working in retail for a while, and I saw one of my colleagues saying this to a customer first thing in the morning. Can I help you at all? Give me a shout out if you need a hand. I'm not gonna put these subtitles on purpose here. I listened to it as usual and I'm thinking, that's a great expression. I will use it next time. And then at some point, I realized something, and then that was I didn't translate what he said. It's more accurate to say I understood the role, its role rather than just meaning. Probably you don't get it straight away, so let me give you a couple of examples. So let's say I say, may I ask your name? I think you will respond by saying your name, right? But if you have mastered an English brain truly, you don't respond to may I ask your name because it's the translation of お名前は何ですか? No, you respond because you recognize the role. It's a phrase where the person is asking for your name. That's why you say your name. Look, there's a huge difference between understanding the translation and understanding the role of what's just spoken. Another example will be, thank you isn't simply a translation of ありがとう. No, it's a phrase that plays the role of expressing gratitude. Sorry is an expression to show your apology. It is used when you want to explain something. There is used you are introducing or pointing out the existence of something. Basically, having an English brain is the state that you take those words as they are because you know the role of what is just spoken. Honestly, even if you cannot write down, it's called dictation in Japanese. Can I help you at all? Can I help you at all? Word for word, without any mistakes. But as long as you understand the role, so that means the person is offering help. The communication can still happen. When this communication happens, it means you understand English. So you don't necessarily have to know the correct translation of can I help you at all? And I think we often hear that developing an English brain means like, being able to think in English without our mother tongue involved. Have you ever thought about what exactly you should do to develop that skills? And I was like, actually I haven't, so I will explain in my own words. A lot of people believe that to develop the English brain, what you have to do is study English, aka translating from Japanese to English. But now I can see it's not entirely true. Now I'm going to show you some skills that I thought important and a couple of tips that you can start from today. The very first skill, which is often overlooked, is the flexibility and genuine curiosity to accept English communication as it is. It's not necessarily translation. When you see a friend, what would you say first? The very first thing that you say, that would be hello or hi, how are you, right? But in Japan, would you say 元気ですか? 今日の調子はどうですか? ご気分はどうですか? Probably you don't. I know it depends on the person, but when someone compliments you, how would you react? Probably in English-speaking countries, a lot of people would say, thank you, or oh, you're too kind. Could be, oh, I'm flattered. But in Japan, it's changing, but still a lot of people would say, 全然私そんなことないです。いや、私全然です。Something like that. It's not about translation, but it's about how people communicate. This is a skill that goes beyond grammar or vocabulary. English has its own unique way of communicating. Unfortunately, in school, we don't really learn it. I also understand that, as I said before, we are heavily influenced by our native language and culture. So I know it's difficult. It's hard to override it. So this process becomes challenging, but I believe we can work on it. What you have to do is you need to immerse yourself in English-speaking environments or even culture to understand how English is naturally spoken. And in the end, this is probably how babies absorb language, right? It's not about translation, but babies observe like how people communicate each other. Now you can see the importance of input, but what we are talking about here is not necessarily about translation. It's more about our curiosity and our appreciation towards English. The culture where English is spoken. Let's move on to another skill which I already talked about. For example, we say thank you because we want to show our appreciation. You say it is because you want to explain something, like it is blue, it is cold. You will truly be able to use those phrases when you understand their role and when the feeling that you want to express aligns with that. When you want to express gratitude, for example, and then he is thank you, and then they match together, then you say it. You don't say thank you because thank you's translation is arigato. Friends, can you see the difference? Actually, Chris Lonsdale, I mentioned about him in one of my videos. That's similar to what he said. Learning language is not necessarily about translating. It's about understanding what the other person was trying to say. If someone says stop and then you stop, right? Because you understand what the other person was trying to say. So even though you can't translate it, okay, stop. You don't have to think about it. But as soon as you understand what the person was trying to say, it's communication. So you understood the person. And looking back now, I wish I was able to understand those two things that I have just mentioned earlier, but I think it was part of my journey, learning journey. I wish I could explain it better, but it's interesting. Like learning language is not something logical. A lot of things are kind of integrated and they are all like tangible. So I don't know how to explain it sometimes, but it must have been such a long story. I hope you guys learned something from that. Thank you for watching this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you've got any questions, comments, please let me know. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you're more than welcome to as well. All right, I see you in the next video soon.